Hello, I'm Dominic Walker, JMW's Inside Man. My guest is Chris Deely. Chris is a solicitor within JMW's Employment Law Department. So, Chris, we heard recently about the Blackpool footballer Jake Daniels, and I'll just read a quote actually from the Blackpool Football Club website, which said, "Off the pitch, I've been hiding the real me and who I really am. I've known my whole life that I'm gay, and I now feel that I'm ready to come out and be myself." It's nice that a football player can feel comfortable doing that. There's no suggestion, of course, that Blackpool Football Club have been anything but supportive, which they very much have, along with Stonewall and the teammates and etc. But how does the law protect employees who are perhaps suffering from, any sort of abuse related to the sexuality?
Absolutely, yeah. The law does a lot to protect people who are suffering from homophobia or sexual orientation discrimination in general. Sexual orientation is a protected characteristic under the Equality Act. So discriminating on grounds of sexual orientation is treated in the same way as it would be if it were on basis of race or gender or even age. So I think hopefully it's fantastic that Jake's finally felt able to be the person that he is and to come out with that publicly. So hopefully, as you say, Blackpool are going to be very supportive of him. But should there be any unsavoury incidents, the law is there to help as well.
It's inconceivable that people would suffer abuse in 2022, but they do. So can I give you a hypothetical scenario, if you don't mind me sort of throwing that at you, Chris? If Jake was to get, or any other football player for that matter, was to get abuse from teammates, and perhaps supporters as well, what would happen in that scenario?
Yeah, so there's I'll take teammates first because it's a simpler situation to deal with. Because the Equality Act applies to certain contexts, and one of those is employment. And so your employer is under a duty to protect you from discrimination, not only from the employer itself, but from your colleagues and from other employees of your employer. So teammates, of course, would be employees of the football club. So any unsavory behavior, any comments, even if it's as simple as refusing to pass to him in training because they don't like the fact that he's gay, that is something that the club could potentially be held liable for as their employer. So it's something that I have no doubt that Blackpool will be dealing with internally to make sure that just in case there are any individuals within the club that have a distaste for Jake having come out as gay, which I would very much hope there aren't in this day and age, but it does happen. They will be taking a strong stance on that internally, I have no doubt.
And what about supporters then, Chris?
Fans are treated a little bit differently because they're not employees of the football club. In effect, they're kind of the customers of the football club. And so the Equality Act doesn't extend to protecting people directly from harassment by third parties, by customers when they're in that employment context. But what it does oblige Blackpool to do is to make sure that they treat any complaints that might be brought by Jake or by any other footballer who's suffering harassment on the grounds of sexual orientation. They have those complaints the same as they would any other grounds of complaint, whether it's somebody's making racial insults or something like that, but they have to treat it the same. And so that is kind of the area in which a football club would need to be careful, is to make sure that it's treating these topics with equivalent sort of seriousness in effect. As for the fans themselves, obviously there could be criminal sanctions, there could be civil lawsuits brought for any sort of comments that are made from the stands or on social media, and in a footballing context as well, there may well be sort of FA penalties or football banning orders for anything that's particularly egregious. So that they're not going to get off scot-free, but the employer themselves can't be. It's trickier for the employer to be held liable for those sorts of comments.
And Chris, how can you help employers who would like to ensure that the workplace is more inclusive?
Absolutely. So obviously, an employer can only do so much to control what its employees do. They are their own people after all. But the big things that we can help with are workplace policies, so making it abundantly clear to all your employees exactly what their obligations are and exactly what they can and can't do, and backing that up with good solid training. Sometimes, people come from different backgrounds and cultures, and that's especially the case in an industry so international as football is. And sometimes people just need a training session to kind of really strike home what is acceptable and what isn't. And that can also help an employer discharge its obligations to make sure that it's taken reasonable steps to deal with the problem, which can also help with its own liability for things like indirect discrimination. If you can show that you have taken all reasonable steps to prevent discrimination from occurring and it still happened, then you as the employer are relatively safe from liability.
Chris, thank you very much for your insight. If you'd like to contact Chris, you can email insideman@jmw.co.uk or call 0161 82 81 999. I'm Dominic Walker, JMW's Inside Man.